She boarded the plane with nothing but a worn-out bag and tired eyes. But when she woke up with her head on a stranger's shoulder, she had no idea that man would change her life forever.
Before we continue into the story, I would like to know where you're watching from.
Chapter 1. Her World. Clara pressed the crumpled ticket against her chest as she shuffled nervously down the jet bridge. The boarding line moved slowly, and with every step, she felt her heartbeat grow louder. It was her first time on a plane. The smell of expensive cologne, freshly brewed coffee, and leather filled the air as she stepped into the cabin. She blinked at the polished aisles, the neatly dressed passengers who looked like they belonged in magazines. Her worn sneakers and secondhand dress suddenly felt like a spotlight on her poverty. Her seat was in first class, a mistake, she was sure. But the attendant scanned her ticket, smiled politely, and guided her forward. Clara gripped the strap of her faded bag tighter, cheeks burning. "Here, miss, 3A. She slid into the wide leather seat, her fingers trembling as she touched the armrest. It was softer than any couch she'd ever owned. She tucked herself into the corner, trying to make herself invisible. What she didn't know was that the man sitting next to her was watching silently. Alexander Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, didn't believe in accidents. He believed in control of his time, his empire, his emotions. This flight was supposed to be quiet. He had rejected his assistant's offer of company and carried only his laptop bag. He sat with his usual composure, tailored suit, silver watch glinting beneath the cabin lights, expression unreadable. When the girl in the worn dress sat beside him, he almost asked the flight attendant to move her. She didn't fit in here, not in his world of wealth and precision. But something stopped him. She looked nervous, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her bag. She reminded him of something he had long forgotten, what it felt like to be out of place, to not belong. So he said nothing. He opened his laptop, his world of figures and contracts, and let her be. Chapter 2. The Spark. The plane lifted off. Clara shut her eyes, clutching the armrest with all her strength. Every bump made her gasp softly. The man beside her barely flinched. Hours passed. The hum of the engine, the soft dimming of the lights, the rhythmic flipping of pages on the man's laptop, all blended together. Clara's exhaustion, from weeks of double shifts at the diner, caught up with her. Her head dipped once, twice, and then, without meaning to, she let it rest gently against the stranger's shoulder. Alexander stiffened. His first instinct was to move, to clear his throat, to shake her awake. But when he turned his head slightly, he saw her face, peaceful, innocent, lips parted in soft sleep. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. Something about her vulnerability disarmed him. Nobody leaned on Alexander Blackwood. Nobody dared to. He was the man people feared, respected, envied. But this girl, this stranger, had simply fallen asleep on him, as if he were safe. He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly closed his laptop. He leaned back, letting her rest. Against every instinct, he let her stay. For the first time in years, Alexander Blackwood allowed someone that close. And for Clara, though she didn't know it yet, that borrowed moment of peace would change everything.
Have you ever trusted someone by accident without even realizing it? What would you do if you woke up on the shoulder of a stranger? Let me know in the comments.
Chapter 3. The Landing. The jolt of the plane landing startled Clara awake. Her eyes fluttered open, and the first thing she noticed was warmth, broad, steady warmth beneath her cheek. She jerked upright, her face flooding crimson when she realized she'd been sleeping on the shoulder of the man beside her. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean," she stammered, her hands flailing in embarrassment. Alexander turned his head, his dark eyes fixed on her. For a moment, she couldn't read him at all. Then, to her shock, the corner of his lips curved, just slightly. "It's fine," he said, his voice deep, smooth, almost dangerous. Clara's heart skipped. Fine? That was all? She scrambled to straighten herself, praying no one else had noticed. But they had. She could feel it. The curious glances from other passengers. Whispers tickled the air. Who is she? Why is she with him? She hugged her bag tighter and kept her eyes down, determined to disappear the second they got off the plane. She had no plans for Vegas, only a layover before her bus ride home. Her ticket was crumpled in her pocket, her budget stretched thin. She just needed to survive the night in this glittering city that was everything she wasn't. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. At baggage claim, she accidentally dropped her bag, clothes tumbling across the shiny floor. She knelt, frantically trying to gather them before anyone stared too long. And then, he was there, the same man, kneeling beside her, handing her a scarf she'd dropped. Clara froze. "You again?" she whispered. His eyebrow arched. "Me?" He said it like he was used to being recognized, but she clearly had no idea who he was. She shoved her things back into her bag. "Thank you. I'm really sorry about the plane. I didn't mean to—" "You already apologized." His voice had that firm, final tone, but there was a trace of something else too. Amusement. Hours later, Clara found herself walking alone along the neon-drenched streets of Vegas. She didn't have money for a hotel. The cheapest one laughed in her face when she asked the price. She sat on a bench outside a glittering casino, staring at the lights. For the first time, tears stung her eyes. "You'll get through this," she whispered to herself. "You always do." Talking to yourself? The voice startled her. She turned, and there he was again. Alexander Blackwood, standing in his immaculate suit, looking impossibly out of place among the drunk tourists and flashing lights. She blinked. "Do you follow me everywhere?" "I could ask you the same," he said dryly. But then he studied her closer, the way her hands shook as she clutched her bag. "You don't have a place to stay." Clara looked away. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." Something in her tone, pride, exhaustion, a trace of pain, hit him harder than he expected. Against his own logic, he found himself saying, "Come inside, have a drink." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I'm not in the habit of asking twice." Chapter 4. The drink that changed everything. Inside the casino bar, the music thumped and laughter rang out. Clara sat stiffly at the corner table, clutching a soda because she didn't drink. Alexander ordered whiskey, studying her in silence. "Why Vegas?" he finally asked. She laughed nervously. "If I told you the truth, you'd think I was pathetic. Try me." She fiddled with her glass. "I was supposed to start a job tomorrow in California, but the company went bankrupt. I lost it before I even started. This trip was all I had left. Now I'm stuck here. Broke." Alexander said nothing for a long moment. She expected mockery, but instead, he leaned back and murmured, "Life has a way of testing us." Their eyes met. Something unspoken lingered between them. Two people from completely different worlds, yet oddly bound by the night. And then the drinks kept coming, not for Clara, but for Alexander. He never let himself slip, never loosened control. But tonight, with her laughter spilling softly between stories, with her eyes shining despite everything she'd lost, he drank more than usual. One drink turned into 2, then 3. Then shots appeared. And somehow, against all reason, Clara, who had sworn she'd only sip soda, found herself swept up in the madness. The neon blurred. Their laughter echoed down the strip. Clara remembered him holding her hand as they stumbled into a tiny wedding chapel, the kind tourists mocked. "You're insane," she giggled. "You're braver than half the people I know," he said. His words were slurred, but his eyes, dark and piercing, looked more honest than she'd ever seen. "I can't marry a stranger," she whispered. "Then don't think of me as a stranger. Think of me as the man who caught you when you were about to fall." Her heart pounded. She should have run, but instead, she nodded. The chapel doors closed. Vows were mumbled, rings borrowed, and with one blurred kiss, fate was sealed. Sunlight cut across the hotel room. Clara groaned, her head pounding. She rolled over and froze. On the nightstand, a marriage certificate glared at her. Her name. His name. Signed, sealed, legal. And beside her, Alexander Blackwood stirred awake. Her heart stopped. What have we done? She whispered. He opened his eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, he actually looked shaken. Married. They were married. Chapter 5. The Explosion. Clara clutched the marriage certificate in trembling hands. This has to be a joke. Alexander rubbed his temples, his jaw tightening. It's not a joke. He reached for the paper, but she pulled it away like it might burn him. Married? Her voice cracked. To you? I don't even know your last name. Blackwood, he muttered, then sighed. Alexander Blackwood. The name rang in her ears, but it meant nothing yet. She was too busy panicking. We can just undo it, right? Annulment, divorce, whatever it is. Vegas marriages are real marriages, he cut in, his tone clipped. Paperwork, courts, it's not as simple as tearing this up. Clara's pulse thundered. Her first time on a plane, her first night in Vegas, and now she was someone's wife? A stranger's wife? No, she whispered, shaking her head. This can't be happening. They dressed in silence, the air heavy with tension. Clara shoved her few belongings back into her worn bag, while Alexander buttoned his shirt with sharp, deliberate movements. Finally, she snapped, Why did you let this happen? You're the one who dragged me into that chapel. His eyes narrowed. Dragged you? You were laughing the whole time. You said yes. I was drunk. So was I, he shot back, his voice like steel. But don't you dare put all of this on me. Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to disappear. Instead, she muttered, Fine, then let's fix it. Today. Right now. Alexander stared at her for a long, unreadable moment. You think everything can be fixed in a day? Yes, she shouted, her voice echoing too loud in the hotel room. Because I refuse to live as your wife, not when I don't even know you. For a flicker of a second, something raw flashed in his eyes. Hurt? Anger? She couldn't tell. But then he shut it down, his face turning to ice. Good, he said coldly. Because I don't intend to be your husband either. They stormed out of the hotel together, heading in opposite directions, until reality stopped Clara in her tracks. She had no money, no ticket home, no plan. Alexander watched as she froze on the sidewalk, biting her lip, her eyes darting like a cornered bird. He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Where are you going? He asked. Away from you, she muttered, not meeting his gaze. Where? She opened her mouth, then shut it. She had no answer. He smirked bitterly. That's what I thought. Clara glared at him, her pride wounded. I'll figure something out. You won't, he said flatly. Then, softer. Not in this city. Not alone. For reasons she couldn't understand, those last two words unsettled her. Not alone. Chapter 6. The Tug of War. They ended up in a small coffee shop, sitting across from each other like enemies negotiating a truce. Clara nursed a black coffee she hated, while Alexander barely touched his. We'll file for annulment, he said, quietly, discreetly. It'll be as if it never happened. Good, she muttered. Until then? He trailed off, studying her face. Until then, you'll stay where I can keep an eye on you. Her head snapped up. Excuse me? He leaned back, his posture calm but commanding. You don't know this city, you don't have money, and you're legally tied to me. Whether I like it or not, you're my responsibility until this is resolved. I am not your responsibility, Clara hissed. Legally, you are. She slammed her cup down. I'd rather sleep on the street than accept your pity. Alexander's jaw ticked. This isn't a pity. It's practical. And whether you believe it or not, I don't abandon people I've made commitments to, even if they're mistakes. The words hung between them, heavier than the smoke of the espresso machine. For a second, Clara saw something behind his eyes. Loneliness, maybe, or a wound he carried. But then it was gone. By the time night fell again, Clara was exhausted. Pride was powerful, but hunger was louder. Her legs ached from walking aimlessly through the strip. So when Alexander's car pulled up beside her, black, sleek, expensive, she froze. The tinted window lowered, and his voice spilled out. Get in. Her lips pressed together. No. You'll freeze out here? I'll manage. You won't, he said evenly, and we both know it. The standoff stretched, neon lights flashing over their faces. Finally, with a frustrated groan, Clara yanked open the door and slid inside. Just until the annulment, she snapped. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Of course. But deep inside, both of them felt the same unsettling truth. Some mistakes don't untangle so easily. Chapter 7. The Mansion. Clara had expected a hotel, maybe some fancy penthouse suite. But when Alexander's car pulled up in front of towering wrought iron gates, her breath caught. The gates opened automatically, revealing a sprawling mansion bathed in golden light. Marble pillars. A fountain that sprayed water like diamonds. Windows tall enough to belong to a cathedral. This is... your house? She whispered, her voice barely audible. My home, he corrected, stepping out of the car with cool detachment. Her fingers tightened around her bag. Home. To her, home was a cramped studio with peeling paint, the scent of cheap ramen lingering in the air. This wasn't a home. It was a palace. She lingered by the car, reluctant to step onto the pristine driveway, afraid she'd leave dirt where perfection reigned. Alexander glanced back at her, impatience flickering across his features. Are you coming? Clara swallowed hard and forced her feet to move. Inside, the mansion was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen fire. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its rail polished to a mirror shine. The air smelled faintly of roses, but not fresh ones, manufactured. Too perfect. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, feeling smaller by the second. This isn't real life, she muttered. Alexander's voice floated from ahead. It's just a house. Just a house? She nearly laughed. You could fit my whole neighborhood inside your living room. He didn't answer, but she caught the way his jaw tightened, like her words had cut deeper than she meant. The first night was unbearable. Clara was shown to a guest room on the east wing, her bag looking pitiful on the lush king-sized bed. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on her. No noise of traffic, no neighbors shouting, just quiet so sharp it rang in her ears. Across the hall, Alexander stood in his office, staring at the marriage certificate again. His pen hovered above a blank page where annulment papers should have been. But for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to start them. Instead, he poured a glass of whiskey and muttered under his breath, "Temporary. She's temporary." But the echo of her laugh from earlier in the day, the unpolished, genuine sound, stayed lodged in his memory. By morning, Clara had decided she couldn't just sit in that mansion like a lost child. She found the kitchen, an immaculate space filled with appliances she didn't know how to use. Coffee, she mumbled, rifling through drawers. When Alexander appeared, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, she nearly jumped out of her skin. You're in my kitchen, he said flatly. Clara bristled. It's not like you offered me breakfast. What was I supposed to do, starve? His lips twitched, almost a smirk. Most people in this house wait for the chef. She froze, eyes wide. You have a chef? I have staff, he said simply. Her jaw dropped. Of course you do. Because why not? She threw her hands up. Meanwhile, I can't even afford instant noodles half the time. Something flickered in his eyes, but he masked it quickly. You're not starving here. Use whatever you like. The words were dismissive, but Clara caught the faintest softness beneath them. Against her better judgment, it made her chest warm. Later that day, Alexander found her wandering the library. If one could call a 2-story hall with floor-to-ceiling books a library. She trailed her fingers along the spines, her eyes wide like a child's. You've really read all these? Most of them, he said. Why? You already have everything. His eyes darkened. Books give me what money can't. For the first time, Clara sensed it, a loneliness in his voice, heavy and unspoken. She tilted her head. Like what? He paused, then met her gaze. Escape. The word hit her harder than she expected. She thought of her own nights curled up with library books, escaping her life in worn pages. For a moment, they weren't billionaire and waitress. They were just two people clinging to words to survive. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken understanding, until Clara broke it with a small awkward laugh. Well, guess we've got that in common. His lips curved, just slightly, the rarest of smiles. Chapter 8. Dinner Tension. That evening, Alexander insisted she join him for dinner. The table stretched so long she felt like shouting across it to reach him. Silver platters gleamed with food she couldn't pronounce. She poked at something delicate and green, finally blurting, Do you always eat like this? This is a normal dinner, he replied. Clara snorted. Normal for royalty, maybe. The corners of his mouth twitched, but then he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You're not comfortable here. The bluntness made her bristle. Of course I'm not. I don't belong in a place like this. You're my wife. His voice was steady, almost challenging. Her chest tightened. Not for long. The words stung more than she meant them to. For both of them. Later, Clara wandered the mansion's halls, restless. She stumbled upon a room tucked away behind heavy oak doors. Inside, a piano. Dust clung to the keys. Sheet music lay abandoned. Curious, she pressed one key. The note rang through the emptiness. Don't touch that. She whirled. Alexander stood in the doorway, his expression colder than she'd ever seen. I'm sorry. I didn't know. He stepped inside, his gaze fixed on the piano like it was haunted. My mother used to play. She wanted me to learn. After she died, I never touched it again. His voice cracked, barely, but enough. Clara's chest ached. For once, she didn't have a sarcastic reply. Instead, she whispered, I'm sorry. Something in him softened, just for a heartbeat. Over the next few days, they fell into a strange rhythm. Clara teased him for his perfectly polished routines. He scolded her for leaving mugs on expensive tables. They clashed, they bantered, they laughed. One afternoon, she found herself sitting by the pool, sunlight dancing across the water. Alexander walked out, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like a man. She watched him silently. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this accident wasn't a disaster. That night, a storm rolled in, rain slashing against the windows. Clara sat curled on the couch, shivering despite the blanket. Alexander entered, pausing when he saw her. You're afraid of storms? She forced a laugh. No, just memories. What kind? She bit her lip. Nights when the power went out. My mom is crying in the dark. I'd pretend thunder was applause to drown it out. Silence. Then Alexander lowered himself onto the couch beside her, not touching, just close enough to share warmth. You're stronger than you think, he murmured. Her throat tightened. And for the first time, she didn't argue. By midnight, the storm still raged. Clara drifted half asleep, her head resting lightly on the couch cushion, mere inches from his shoulder. Alexander sat rigid, fighting the pull inside him. She was temporary. This marriage was a mistake. But as he glanced at her, soft hair brushing her cheek, lips parted in fragile sleep, something in him cracked. For 10 years he had lived behind walls, and now one girl who didn't belong had slipped right through them. Chapter 9. A letter in the night. Clara couldn't sleep. Again. The mansion was too quiet, too polished. Her heart longed for the comforting chaos of home, the creak of her old apartment door, the hum of traffic outside, the clatter of her mother's cooking. She slipped from her room and wandered, bare feet against cool marble floors. Her aimless steps drew her back toward the piano room, the one place Alexander had seemed truly human. But tonight the piano wasn't what caught her attention. A desk sat in the corner, papers stacked neatly, too neatly. A single envelope, slightly crumpled, peeked out. Against her better judgment, Clara reached for it. The handwriting was uneven, faded. She read only the first line before her throat closed. Dear Alexander, I wish I could have been there for you. She froze, guilt washing over her. Do you make a habit of snooping through people's things? His voice cut through the room like a blade. Clara spun, clutching the letter. I just... Alexander strode in, his expression thunderous. He snatched the letter from her hands, jaw tight. You have no right. Her cheeks burned. I didn't mean to. You just what? Thought you'd peel back layers I didn't offer you? His voice was sharp, but there was no mistaking the crack beneath it. Clara's chest ached. It wasn't about snooping. It's about wanting to understand you. You don't let anyone in, Alexander. Not really. For a moment, his eyes locked on hers, blazing with fury and something else. Something raw. Then he turned away. There are things better left buried. But the way his hand trembled around the letter told her the past wasn't buried at all. It was bleeding inside him. The next morning, Clara made coffee, not for herself, but for him. It was her silent olive branch. She placed the steaming mug in front of him as he sat at the breakfast table staring blankly at his tablet. He raised an eyebrow. What is this? Peace offering, she said softly. For a long moment, he didn't touch the cup. Then, almost reluctantly, he lifted it. Took a sip. His brows twitched, whether in approval or disapproval she couldn't tell. Clara leaned against the counter. I'm sorry for last night. I shouldn't have touched your things. Alexander's gaze stayed fixed on the cup. It was my father's letter. He left when I was a child. He tried writing once. I never answered. The vulnerability in his tone startled her. Clara's chest tightened. Why not? Because you can't fix abandonment with ink, he said, his voice low, bitter. She didn't know what to say, but she wanted to. She wanted to reach across the table, take his hand, tell him he didn't deserve that kind of wound. Instead, she whispered, You kept it. That means some part of you wanted to forgive. He looked at her then, eyes sharp, searching, like he wasn't sure if she'd just spoken truth or touched a nerve too deep. Later that day, Alexander found her sitting by the window, her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't hear him approach until he spoke. You pry into my past. Fair's fair. What about yours? Clara stiffened. There's not much to tell. Try me. She hesitated. For so long, her past had been a chain she dragged silently. But now, she wanted him to know. My mom raised me alone. She worked herself sick to keep food on the table. When I was 16, she got cancer. I spent years watching her fade. Clara's voice cracked, her throat tight with unshed tears. We couldn't afford treatments, so I worked. Every shift, every odd job, anything to keep the lights on. Alexander's jaw clenched, his gaze unyielding, but his hands curled into fists like her words had lit a fire inside him. Clara gave a shaky laugh. That's why I was on the plane. I saved for months to visit a clinic that promised help. For her. Her voice broke. But I was too late. She passed before I could get her in. Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. Then, softly, Alexander whispered, "I'm sorry." 2 words, simple. But from him, they felt like a lifeline. Chapter 10. Vulnerability Cracks the Ice. That evening, they ended up in the library again, books between them, but words hung heavier than pages. Clara glanced at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever feel like you're just surviving? Like no matter what you do, life is waiting to take something else from you?" Alexander leaned back, his eyes haunted. Every day. Their gazes locked. And in that moment, walls crumbled. They were no longer the billionaire and the poor girl, no longer strangers bound by a drunken mistake. They were 2 broken souls, stitched together by pain they never asked for. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence said enough. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the air. That night, Clara wandered into the music room again, this time without fear. She sat at the piano, fingers trembling as she pressed a few hesitant notes. Alexander appeared at the door. "You play?" "Not really. My mom taught me a little. When the bills got too heavy, she'd hum instead of turning on the radio. Said music was free." A ghost of a smile flickered on his lips. He stepped forward, sitting beside her. Their shoulders brushed. Tentatively, he placed his fingers on the keys, played a soft, haunting melody. Clara watched him, mesmerized. He was different like this, softer, real. Without thinking, she joined in, fumbling clumsily beside his skilled rhythm. They laughed when she hit the wrong note, the sound echoing in the empty room like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel cold. It felt alive. The music faded. Silence stretched. Their shoulders touched again, lingering this time. Clara's breath caught. Alexander turned his head slowly, his gaze locking with hers. The intensity in his eyes made her heart thunder. For a moment, she thought he'd close the distance, that their lips would meet, that the fire between them would ignite. But then, he stood abruptly, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's late. You should rest." Clara sat frozen, her chest aching with the weight of what almost was. Chapter 11. A Broken Vase. Clara was dusting the shelves in the library when it happened. Her elbow brushed a crystal vase, easily worth more than she'd ever make in a year. The vase wobbled, tipped, and shattered across the marble floor. Her heart stopped. Panic surged through her veins. She dropped to her knees, trying to gather the shards with trembling hands. "Stop." The sharp command froze her. Alexander stood at the doorway, his gaze fixed on the broken vase. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean—" He crossed the room, his polished shoes crunching on glass. To her shock, he crouched beside her. He gently pulled her hands away from the shards. "You'll cut yourself," he said, his voice quieter now. Clara blinked, startled. "But the vase is just glass." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "You're not replaceable. That's the difference." Her breath caught. For a man who measured the world in assets, money, and value, the words hit her harder than she expected. Later that day, Clara wandered into the kitchen, determined to make herself useful. She rolled up her sleeves, pulling ingredients from the fridge with confidence. Alexander appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" "Cooking." She flashed him a smile. "Or trying to." "You don't need to. That's what staff is for." "Staff didn't make my mom's stew when I was sick, Staff didn't stretch rice for 3 days to keep the lights on. You're overdue for a real meal." He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The chopping board became her stage. Clara hummed softly as she sliced vegetables, a tune her mother used to hum. Alexander leaned against the counter, watching her with quiet intrigue. When she nearly dropped the pot lid, he caught it effortlessly. "You're dangerous in the kitchen," he muttered. Clara laughed. "You're just spoiled." Minutes later, they sat at the table, bowls steaming in front of them. Alexander took a cautious bite. His brows rose slightly. "This is edible." Clara gasped. "Excuse me, that's the highest compliment I've gotten from you so far." For the first time, Alexander laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled them both. It was rough, unused, but real. Clara found herself grinning. "There it is. You do have a soul." He shook his head, but the corner of his mouth curved upward. The mansion's gardens stretched wide, manicured hedges framing rose beds that smelled faintly of summer. Alexander rarely walked them. Beauty had no place in his disciplined routine. But Clara tugged him outside, insisting on fresh air. They strolled in silence, the gravel crunching beneath their steps. Clara leaned down to smell a rose, her smile soft, childlike. "You're not afraid of thorns?" Alexander asked. She glanced at him. "Thorns are proof the flower fought to survive. Makes them more beautiful, don't you think?" The word struck him deeper than she knew. His chest tightened, because wasn't that her? Bruised by life, scarred by loss, and yet still radiant. Without realizing it, Alexander reached out. He brushed a petal she'd been admiring, his fingers close enough that they almost touched hers. Neither pulled away. That night, music played softly from a record player in the corner of the library. Clara swayed absent-mindedly, humming along as she arranged books. Alexander entered, stopping at the sight. "You dance alone?" She turned, smiling. "Better than not dancing at all." For a moment, he hesitated. Then, with a small sigh, he extended his hand. "Come here." Clara blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." Her heart skipped. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. He pulled her close, closer than she expected. His hand rested firmly on her waist, guiding her with surprising ease. "You know how to dance," she whispered, surprised. "Mother insisted. Said a man who couldn't lead on a dance floor would never lead in life." His voice was low, almost distant. They moved in slow circles, the world fading until only the music and their breath remained. Clara felt his warmth through her dress, his steady heartbeat beneath the facade of control. For a fleeting moment, it wasn't about contracts or marriages or mistakes. It was just two people finding rhythm in each other. The song ended, but neither stepped back. Their eyes locked, the air between them heavy, charged. Clara's lips parted, her breath unsteady. Alexander's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. For a heartbeat, it seemed inevitable. But then he whispered, almost to himself, "You make me forget." Clara's chest tightened. "Forget what?" "That I built these walls for a reason." Before she could answer, he released her hand and stepped back, breaking the spell. Clara stood frozen, her heart aching with everything left unsaid. Later that night, Clara returned to her room. On the nightstand sat a small box wrapped in silver. She frowned, curious. Inside was a delicate necklace, simple but elegant. A single rose pendant hung from it, carved with intricate detail. A note sat beneath, "For the girl who sees beauty in thorns." Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. For all his walls, Alexander Blackwood was letting her in. Piece by fragile piece. Chapter 12. A Storm Over the City. The night began with laughter. Clara had convinced Alexander to attend a charity gala, promising he wouldn't regret it. She wore a flowing navy dress borrowed from the mansion's wardrobe, her hair swept up in loose curls. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off her. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, but Clara's smile was the brightest thing there. He found himself watching her more than he watched anyone else. For a while, it felt like they weren't pretending anymore. Not fake husband and wife, not trapped by a drunken accident, just two souls learning to belong. But storms don't announce themselves until thunder strikes. Clara had slipped away to grab a drink when she overheard them. Two sharply dressed men, glasses in hand, speaking with laughter dipped in cruelty. Poor girl thinks she belongs here. Doesn't even know who she married. She will, though. Can you imagine her face when she finds out? Alexander Blackwood doesn't marry by accident. He's testing her. Everyone knows he's planning to buy out the Romero family's hotel chain. She's just a pawn. Clara froze. Pawn. Test. Buyout. The words wrapped around her throat, choking the air out of her lungs. Alexander's voice behind her made her flinch. Clara? She spun, eyes wide, the glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. He reached for her arm, concerned about etching his face. What happened? Her body shook. Is it true? What? His brow furrowed. Don't play dumb. Her voice cracked through the music and chatter. This marriage, me, all of it. Was I just part of some business deal? Conversations around them faltered. People turned. The glittering ballroom became a stage. Alexander stiffened, his jaw locking. Who told you that? Her chest heaved. So it is true. No. His voice was sharp, commanding. Listen to me. I've been listening, Clara snapped, tears blurring her vision. Listening to your cold words, your orders, your control. And like a fool, I thought maybe beneath it all you saw me. But you don't. You never did. Alexander reached for her, but she pulled back like his touch was fire. Clara. Don't, she whispered, her voice breaking. Don't you dare say my name like it means something. He could have explained. He could have pulled her aside, told her everything. The deals, the rumors, the truth. But Alexander Blackwood's pride was a wall taller than any skyscraper. His throat tightened, words clawing at him. But in the end, silence won. Clara shook her head, bitter tears streaming. I knew it was too good to be real. You don't marry girls like me, Alexander. You buy them, you use them, and when you're done, you throw them away. Her words struck him harder than any deal gone bad, harder than any betrayal in his career. But he stood there, silent. And silence was the worst confession of all. Clara's heels clicked furiously across the marble, echoing in the stunned ballroom. Guests whispered, scandal rippling like wildfire. Alexander didn't move. Not when she pushed through the doors. Not when the night air swallowed her whole. He stood in the center of his empire, the weight of his choices pressing down on him, because for the first time in years, Alexander Blackwood had something worth fighting for. And he let it walk away. Clara returned to her guest room, slamming the door behind her. She ripped off the necklace he had given her, the rose pendant clattering to the floor. Her sobs broke the silence, raw and unrestrained. She curled on the bed, clutching a pillow to her chest, whispering the same bitter refrain. Stupid, stupid girl. Meanwhile, in his study, Alexander poured himself a drink he didn't touch. He stared at the flickering fire, her words replaying over and over. You don't marry girls like me. You buy them. You use them. His grip tightened on the glass until it shattered in his hand. Blood dripped onto the carpet, but he didn't flinch. Because pain on the outside was nothing compared to the agony clawing at him inside. Hours later, Clara sat by the window, staring at the city lights. Somewhere out there was freedom. She could leave, disappear, pretend none of this had happened. But her heart ached at the thought of never seeing him again. In another wing of the house, Alexander stood on the balcony staring at the same city lights. For the first time in his life, money, deals, and power meant nothing. because the one thing he wanted most had slipped through his fingers, and he had no one to blame but himself. Chapter 13. Clara's Dilemma. Clara didn't sleep that night. The city outside glowed like fireflies against the dark, but her chest was heavy, her eyes burning. She had her small bag already packed by the door. Nothing of the mansion was hers, not the dresses, not the jewelry, not even the air she breathed under Alexander's roof. Leaving would be simple. Yet, she couldn't move. Her hand hovered on the bag's handle, shaking. Why can't I just walk away? She thought of the broken vase in the library, how he'd crouched beside her and said she wasn't replaceable. She thought of their laughter in the kitchen, the way his rare smile had made her chest ache. She thought of his hand guiding her across the dance floor, strong but careful, as if he feared he might break her if he held too tightly. And then she thought of the look on his face in the ballroom, stone, cold, unreadable. The silence that screamed louder than truth. Her heart whispered, "Stay." Her pride screamed, "Run." A tear rolled down her cheek. "Why do you have to be him?" she whispered into the emptiness. "Why couldn't you just be anyone else?" On the other side of the mansion, Alexander hadn't moved from his study. The fire had burned down to embers, the glass he'd shattered still bleeding red into the carpet. His hand was bandaged poorly with a torn strip of cloth. He hadn't cared enough to call a doctor, but he cared about her. Too much. Clara's words carved through him, deeper than any rival's insult ever had. "You don't marry girls like me. You buy them. You use them." The worst part? He couldn't even be angry at her. She had every reason to believe it. The rumors about him weren't just smoke. They were flame, fed by decades of cold deals and ruthless decisions. He had built a reputation as a man who saw people as pawns, a man who used and discarded, a man untouchable by emotion, and now the one person he wanted most, no, the only person he'd ever wanted, believed the lie he had made into truth. Alexander braced his hands on the desk, his knuckles white. For the first time in his life, he realized something terrifying. He had no control. Not over her, not over his feelings, not over the risk of losing her forever. Near dawn, Clara sat at the desk in her room, a sheet of paper before her. She wrote slowly, her hand trembling. "Alexander, when I met you, I thought you were everything I should run from. Cold, arrogant, untouchable. But then you showed me glimpses of something else, something real. For a while I believed it. I believed you saw me, not just what I could give you. But now, I don't know. I can't stay where I'm not wanted. And I can't love a man who won't fight for me." She stared at the words, her chest aching. Tears smeared the ink. She folded the paper, slid it into an envelope, and placed it on the nightstand. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her bag, waiting for the sun. Alexander found her just as she was about to leave. The morning light spilled across the hallway, painting her in soft gold as she clutched her bag. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders, her eyes red but determined. "Going somewhere?" His voice was low, gravelly from a night without sleep. She froze, the air thick between them. "Yes. Don't." She turned, anger flashing. "Don't tell me what to do. Not anymore." His jaw tightened. "Clara!" "No." Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. "You had your chance to explain, to tell me the truth. Instead, you just stood there, letting everyone watch me fall apart. Do you have any idea how small that made me feel?" He flinched, the words striking true. "I wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" Her laugh was bitter. "From what? From hearing the truth? From seeing who you really are? From humiliating yourself in front of a room full of sharks," he snapped, his composure cracking. "From being dragged into battles you don't deserve to fight." Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I would have fought them. I would have fought anyone. For you. But you—" Her throat closed, tears spilling. "You wouldn't fight for me." Silence, heavy, suffocating. Alexander stepped forward, closing the space between them. "You're wrong." Clara's eyes searched for his, desperate, wounded. Then prove it. His hands trembled as he reached for her shoulders. You think I don't care? You think this marriage means nothing to me? Clara, I haven't slept a full night since the day I woke up with you in Las Vegas. Not because I regret it, but because for the first time in my life, I want something I can't buy. I want you. Her lips parted, her breath faltering. You're right. I've been cold, ruthless. I've made deals that would make you hate me if you knew. But with you, I forget who I am, and that terrifies me. His voice cracked, raw, vulnerable. I didn't tell you the truth because I didn't want to admit it to myself, that I need you, that I'd risk everything for you. Tears blurred Clara's vision. Her walls trembled, ready to fall, but fear held them up. What if I believe you? She whispered. What if I let myself love you, and then one day you wake up and realize I was just a mistake? His hands cupped her face, firm and desperate. Then I'll spend every day proving you're not. Her heart thudded painfully. The letter on her nightstand, sealed and waiting, suddenly felt like a lie. But Clara pulled back, her chest heaving. Words are easy, Alexander, too easy. I need more than promises. His gaze darkened with determination. Then give me a chance to show you. She shook her head, tears streaming. I don't know if I can. He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. Clara, don't walk away. Not now. Not when I've finally found the one thing that makes all of this. He gestured to the mansion, the empire. Worthless in comparison. Her breath hitched. And what if I do? What if I walk out that door and never look back? His jaw clenched, his voice broke. Then I'll spend the rest of my life searching for you, and I'll never forgive myself. The weight of his words crushed the silence between them. Clara looked at him, really looked, at the man who had been her enemy, her savior, her accidental husband, the man who broke her heart and yet somehow still held it in his hands. Her bag slipped from her fingers, thudding softly against the floor, but she didn't move closer. Not yet. I need time, she whispered, her voice trembling. I need to know this isn't just another deal for you, that I'm not just convenient. Alexander's chest ached, but he nodded slowly. Then take time. Take everything you need. But don't leave thinking you're nothing to me, Clara. You're everything. Her tears spilled freely now. She turned away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. But she didn't pick up the bag. And that, he realized, was its own kind of choice. Clara stayed in her room the rest of the day, the envelope with her goodbye letter untouched. She traced the rose pendant with her fingers, torn between fear and longing. Alexander worked through meetings like a ghost, his mind never leaving her. For the first time, deals went unsigned, calls unanswered. His empire could wait, because she couldn't. Both of them, though apart, had chosen the same thing without saying it aloud, to wait, to hope, to give love a chance, even if it terrified them. Chapter 14. The Empty Mansion. The days that followed were like walking through a haunted house. The mansion was silent, too silent. Clara remained mostly in her room, and Alexander moved through the halls like a ghost. They avoided each other, yet the air between them vibrated with unspoken words. Every time Clara passed his study, her hand twitched, wanting to knock. Every time Alexander heard footsteps in the hall, his heart leapt, hoping it was her. Neither of them acted. Both of them waited. But waiting couldn't last forever. One evening, Clara found herself in the garden again. The roses glistened with dew under the moonlight. She touched the pendant Alexander had given her, her heart aching. It wasn't just jewelry. It was him, his vulnerability, his attempt at giving her something real. And despite everything, she realized she had never taken it off. Her chest tightened. Maybe that's my answer. Inside, Alexander sat in his study staring at the untouched glass of whiskey. He hadn't had the courage to face her since their fight. Pride kept him rooted, but pride also shredded him alive. Finally, he slammed the glass down and stood. Enough. For the first time in his life, Alexander Drake, the man who built an empire in control, was about to surrender it all for love. He found her in the garden, standing among the roses. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, her eyes wide, her pendant catching the moonlight. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Alexander's voice broke the silence. "Clara, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending I don't need you." Her breath caught. "Alexander, no." He stepped closer, his voice raw. "I've spent my whole life thinking love was weakness, that needing someone made you vulnerable. But you've made me realize it's the only strength that matters." Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. He swallowed hard, his chest heaving. "If you walk away, I won't stop you. But I'll never stop loving you. I'll never stop wishing I had fought harder." Silence. Clara's tears spilled over. She stepped forward, her hand trembling as she touched his bandaged hand. "Why didn't you say this before?" she whispered. His voice cracked. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of losing you. And I'd rather lose control 1,000 times than lose you once." Chapter 15. The Choice Made. Her heart broke and healed in the same moment. She saw it in his eyes. This wasn't power, or deals, or convenience. This was Alexander stripped bare. She rose on her toes and pressed her forehead to his. "Then don't lose me." The dam shattered. His arms pulled her against him, desperate, unyielding. Her sobs mingled with his ragged breaths. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, as if the words were oxygen. She clutched his shirt, her voice muffled. "I love you too. God help me, I love you too." And just like that, the waiting ended. Weeks later, the world whispered about another Drake wedding. This time, no tabloids, no drunken Vegas chapels, no rushed vows. This time, Clara walked down the aisle in a simple gown, the rose pendant resting at her throat. The ballroom wasn't filled with sharks. It was filled with those few Alexander trusted, and those Clara loved. As she reached him, his eyes softened in a way no one in the world had ever seen before. "You look like everything I never thought I'd deserve," he whispered when she reached him. She smiled, her eyes shining. "And you look like the man who finally proved me wrong." When they spoke their vows, neither promised perfection. Only honesty, only love. And when Alexander kissed her, the world seemed to breathe with them. Later that night, after the guests were gone, Alexander and Clara sat together in the garden among the roses. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the very shoulder she had once fallen asleep on, a stranger in a plane. He smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You know, this is how it started." Clara laughed softly, her eyes closing. "Best mistake I ever made." He turned to her, his voice low. "Not a mistake. Fate." Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "Then promise me one thing." "Anything." "Whatever storms come, you won't let go." His lips brushed her knuckles. "Never." And in that moment, with the night wrapping around them, Clara finally believed it.
Love wasn't the loss of control. It was the truest power of all. The poor girl who had once been invisible now stood seen, loved, and chosen, not for convenience, not for status, but for who she was. And the cold CEO finally found the one deal worth surrendering everything for. Do you believe love can begin by accident, like falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder, and still grow into something that lasts forever? Or is that only in stories? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your thoughts.